Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Interviews at El Vocero Hispano TV. My name is Jose Aguirre, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Senate Lenear, a dedicated candidate running for mayor of Grand Rapids, with a strong commitment to community engagement and a vision for a prosperous and inclusive city. Senita aims to bring her experience and passion to the forefront of Grand Rapids leadership. It's worth noting that in 2013, she was elected as the first Black woman elected ever as a city commissioner. Welcome to the set, Senita.
Thank you for having me, Jose.
No, well, thank you for accepting the invitation. We know you might be pretty busy right now, especially during this time of the year, so we really appreciate the time that you took for us and for our audience. So without further ado, I would like to start. Can you elaborate on your decision to run for mayor of Grand Rapids after serving two terms as a city commissioner?
Yes, so thank you for that question. I am not the type of person who has set out to have all of these political aspirations. When I was first appointed to the school board for the city of Grand Rapids, it was through an appointment process, and it was because my sister told me to turn on the news and we were seeing someone resign, and she encouraged me to run because she thought it was a great idea. And after serving on the school board, I really didn't have any aspirations to go to the city commission. But it was until I had gotten a phone call as the then president of the board when we heard the superintendent share that there had been gunfire outside of one of our schools, our elementary schools, around 7 a.m. And at that point, I was tugged to not only work to make a difference within the buildings, but then to make a difference in the community. And so that was kind of the calling I felt to go then to the city commission. And so really the reality is that there was another initiative that happened while serving as commissioner that kind of led me to think, I think I need to serve as mayor as well. And let me see if the people who have been very supportive of my service as commissioner and as school board member will also elect me as their mayor. And so, I'm excited to be able to expound upon existing initiatives that I started as a city commissioner, many of which were initiatives that are outside of kind of the typical duties as a commissioner. And wanted to expand on those things, wanted to get more people involved, and wanted to be a representative because I know representation matters for this community to serve at this point as a historic mayor, being the first African-American woman to serve in that seat.
Of course. No, it makes sense. Thank you. In your announcement, you highlighted several key areas of focus, including economic development and equity initiatives. Could you discuss a little more how you plan to prioritize these initiatives if elected as mayor?
Economic development is critical for me because what we learned while I was serving as commissioner is that the city of Grand Rapids underinvested in certain areas of the city. And one of those areas was the third ward. So there was data that the city reported out on where there were underinvestments in the third ward. As a result, and because of advocacy from myself as well as my colleagues, Commissioner Dave Allen and then Commissioner Moody, we were able to get the Third Ward Equity Fund to try to reverse some of the underinvestment that had occurred. Because I know that this underinvestment exists, it is in the best interest to be able to highlight that these things happen and how can we make things better. One of the ways that I did that as a commissioner is I served on the Southtown board where we expanded from Madison Square into 6 business districts.
Okay.
And so what you can see now in Seymour Square, in Boston Square, Division, a certain portion of Division Avenue, Franklin and Eastern, which is now MLK and Eastern, Alger Heights, we have been able to invest in a lot of those business districts. So now you're seeing through our Southtown Corridor Improvement District Authority. And so now you'll see facade improvements. You'll see where businesses have been sprucing up the outside of their businesses, which then makes for those businesses, business districts to be lively. And it allows for more walkability. We're adding lighting into one of the business districts. We're adding trash cans to keep business districts clean. And so those are some of the things economically, on the economic development side of things that I'd like to see us do more of. If we were able to do that, expanding into 6 business districts, how then can we do the same thing across the city? We have streets like 28th Street, which we're not too far from right now. We have
Right.
streets like Alpine and Plainfield, or even like Michigan Drive, where there have been vacancies in on those streets, and we can build. We have a housing need. We should be able to build some of that housing on these corridors where we already have some of those vacancies.
Yeah.
And then how do we spur some of that development in those locations?
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Now, moving a little to another area of focus. Unfortunately, Grand Rapids Police Department has been shadowed in the past by a history of accusations that go from racism, excessive use of force, and even incidents like the tragic murder of Patrick Leoya. There is obviously lack of trust from these communities, from minority communities, and from any community in general. But how do you plan to bridge that gap between the Grand Rapids Police?
You know, a couple ways. The first one I'll start with is I was chair of the Safe Alliances for Everyone Task Force, which we call SAFE. The SAFE Task Force, we created at the end of our work at the beginning. We did a lot of research and we created an anti-violence strategy. What we learned through that work many years ago is that addressing what's happening in the community is multi-pronged, and it takes all hands on deck from different angles to be able to address it. It also includes that police and community relations aspect. And so we have to create ways for there to be engagement that happens with community and police, so that then that engagement can result in relationships being built, so that then we can reduce some of what you were just talking about, some of the negative experiences that some communities have as they're interacting with the police. Our data shows it. We can't ignore it. We have to talk about it and address it, as opposed to pretending as though it doesn't exist.
Yes.
One of the things that I championed, or I should say encouraged as a commissioner, was for the police department to develop their own strategic plan. You know why? It's because we had a number of initiatives through SAFE, through the 12-point plan, and some other initiatives where the community was saying, this is what we want from the police department. And we would have responses to those requests, with the police saying, these aren't necessarily the things that we think we should do or can do, but we are agreeing that something needs to be done. So the best way to hear from them what needs to be done is for them to devise, in my opinion, was for them to devise a strategic plan that then they would take to the community to engage the community and hear what they see as the solutions. As a result, one of the things that came out of their strategic plan was this neighborhood community police model that I am eager to see them implement fully. They weren't fully staffed, so I know when I left the commission, they weren't able to fully implement it. But what it was going to provide was neighborhoods with the same police officers at all times. And so what you get from that is what you get when you have interactions, absolutely. And so you see that with neighborhood police officers and, with the neighborhood associations, they're there periodically, but they weren't necessarily there at night.
Right.
And so this model says at all times, the people who will be policing that particular neighborhood will also be some of the same people who will be there during the day, who the neighborhood associations, who the neighbors can get to know. They can have many interactions before there's an incident, and now they'll have a relationship built where resolving that incident will be, I think, to the benefit of both community and police to have had those relationships built.
Right.
So I would be advocating for that, and to make sure that that's fully implemented, so that hopefully we can see the results that we're hoping that having that implemented would gain for us.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's creating those bonds, right, between those two parties. I think that's a very important aspect of it. Thank you. And I think you just spoke a little about the SAVE Task Force and your work at the Third Ward Equity Fund. So thank you for touching on that as well. Now, another area that you have mentioned before has been the alignment with the city's carbon neutrality goals.
Yes.
How do you plan to navigate these environmental concerns and also promote economic growth and development?
Yeah, and I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I'm a business owner and I'm also a resident, and I'm also a resident who cares about the environment. So I've been recycling since we had two separate little blue bins that we had to do our own sorting of our recycling in. And proud of that and champion that even in my family. But what I think that has been missing with some of our carbon neutral goals is that I don't necessarily believe we've provided people with tangible goals for themselves. And so households could have some goals. We could talk about in what ways individually we all can contribute to the reduction of our carbon neutral, getting to carbon neutral or neutrality to that point. I think the same thing could be done with businesses. I think we saw it when buildings were being built and they were LEED certified buildings. People, it was clear what it took to get those buildings to become,
there.
That's right. And so we have to create a clear path to get there. And I know we've had C4 who has been meeting for a committee that has been meeting for probably maybe 3 years now. And that committee has been meeting and talking about some of the suggestions and how we can address those things. And I think we just need to expand it, and we need to be clear about what the goals are and how businesses can attain those goals, how individuals can contain those, reach those goals, as well as how government can also on its own with its buildings, and because we have a lot of buildings that we own, how can we too have goals in place to be able to reach those goals together?
Yes. That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Now, another project as well, as we know, is the construction of an amphitheater and the restoration of the river surrounding areas. Now, in the past few days, 2 new reports based on employee opinions from 5 different counties found that the lack of affordable childcare keeps parents out of the workforce. Obviously, it mainly impacts and limits the financial stability of younger families and increases the employment costs. But it also costs around $279 million in missed economic performance.
Wow.
So, could you elaborate a little bit more on your plans for obviously the river restoration and the construction of this amphitheater, right? And how these projects fit into your vision for Grand Rapids, while we also have those issues on the other hand with people saying, hey, maybe we should invest in affordable childcare.
Yeah, I think that's I haven't heard this survey or the results of this survey, but I think that's a really good question. And I'll start with talking about the river restoration as well as the amphitheater. We do not get this many opportunities to build what I would consider kind of these life-changing, in this case, the river, restoring the river is a life-changing moment in our city's history. The same with the amphitheater. We don't get a whole lot of opportunities to do something that great. It's probably once, a generation that you get these large things. That happened, I believe, with the Van Andel Arena, and I think it may be maybe 20 years old. So, it's kind of this once in a generation that you get these opportunities. What I'm grateful for is that from the onset, we were looking to put together a diverse way of engaging the public surrounding both of those projects, the river restoration as well as the amphitheater, so that we can hear the voice of the community. Now getting some of the feedback that the community is saying, we can do all of this, we can do this really great thing, and then we may not have the bodies to be able to fill the jobs that exist within the amphitheater, for an example. So now what do? I think that's really good feedback. And because we know this will not turn over overnight, then how do we look at what we have in place? I know that there has been some early childhood development dollars that the governor has talked about, that we have, we have a local millage, a Kent County millage regarding early childhood. And I see some of those things connected to childcare, because if the child care provider is providing child care, it's more than likely that child care is tied to early childhood, because they're the younger kids who may not be in school. I know that there are some other initiatives across the state where they're trying to increase at-home child care providers. So I know that there's work being done, but because I'm hearing this for the first time, I'm not sure how those things directly connect with being a solution to what came out of that survey. But I'm grateful that it has come out early enough for us to hopefully be able to address some of those things, including making sure that we're renewing the early childhood millage that's coming up, as well as making sure that we are diversifying the types of child care offerings that exist in our community. I know I again sit on the Southtown board, and there was a proposal that came across our desk regarding a facade improvement at a local business, I think in Alger Heights, and they're doing 24-hour childcare in the building because there are families who have jobs that are third shift workers, and they need childcare. And so these are the things that are going to help us to get to solving some of the problems where the workforce can't get to work because they have children that need to be cared for, and at an affordable rate, because otherwise sometimes it's not even worth leaving the home to go to work if everything that you're making is going to cover the cost of childcare.
Correct. And I think at the end of the day, it gives, for our audiences, gives the peace of mind that and understanding what these projects mean also to the city, while focusing on other areas that might not immediately be needed to be worked on, that we need to work on first.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, awesome.
Yeah, so it's great that the survey was even done early enough to be able to work on those things.
Of course. Another thing that we hear a lot about here in Michigan is lead exposure. Now, lead exposure reduction is another area of focus in your agenda. What specific strategies do you plan to implement to address this issue?
Thank you for that question, too. And so, speaking of things that I've spent time on that's outside of the typical Tuesday Commission day, lead, and being on a lead task force has been one of those. So I was on a countywide lead task force that was made up of county members, city members, and members from the community that made up different sectors. And so we, as a result, we had a number of recommendations that came through that work. We took our recommendations, shared those recommendations with the city. The mayor then created another group to look at kind of specific to what was happening in the city of Grand Rapids, and to look at recommendations for lead and lead reduction in the city of Grand Rapids. And I was a part of that group as well. There also was a group that did a statewide look, to your point that this is a Michigan-wide issue. That all happened before the county's work as well as the city work. So what I feel like we've done really well is we've talked about lead. We've talked about why it's needed to be reduced. But what I don't think we've done enough of is put our dollars, like general fund dollars, to remediating and reducing lead. What we've done really well, though, I'll speak to a few things, one of which was we took third ward equity funding and did a lead awareness campaign. Part of it, kind of going back to an earlier point that I was making, when people know what they can do differently, and you share that with them, they'll do things differently in order to keep their family safe. So that was one thing that I think we did really well. The city of Grand Rapids, we also looked at lead replacement lines and funded lead replacement lines through not just on the city's property, but on the residential property to the households. And so we were able to, so whenever there is a reconstruction project and there are lead pipes that were there, we're having conversations with the people who live there to say, here are some of the options that you can get in order to reduce the lead pipes that you may have in your home. And here's how you go about doing that. So we've done a lot of those things really, really well. we have missed the mark, in my opinion, on addressing and reducing lead in homes with paint, which is how most of the lead exposure happens with the children who are here in Grand Rapids. And so I think that we have used federal funding to do lead abatement in homes, but we have not, as a city, allocated our from general fund dollars to do the exact same thing. And so, excuse me, as mayor, I would champion the allocation of dollars from the general fund to address lead and to abate lead in homes, you know, with paint and things of that nature that we're seeing in those homes.
Wow. And maybe for our viewers, you just spoke about some options that the homeowners have when you're already doing those renovations and the restorations. What would some of those options look like? Or
yeah, and
just
so
very on the top.
Yeah, it's really replacing lead pipes that you have that's on your property at that point. Yeah, and if anyone is interested in learning more about it, they can call 311 and ask to be connected with either the water department or engineering, and someone there can tell them like where their street is on the list of, you know, reconstruction projects or where they may fall in that. And so people can definitely call 311 to get more information about that.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
I know you already spoke a little bit about this earlier in the interview, but you mentioned exploring innovative development ideas like A2P and intentional redevelopment along key areas like Alpine, you mentioned, 28th Street, Plainfield. How do you plan to balance that economic progress with preserving the character of these neighborhoods, which I think is a very valid question.
Yeah, and it's a really important question to ask. And and I'll start off by saying I have been in neighborhoods where you can clearly see where there's new development that has happened. It sticks out like an eyesore, and people are just like, "Oh,
What
happened?
Yeah.
When did this happen?" You can tell clearly that this doesn't belong here, and so I know exactly. Thank you for that question because I know exactly where it's coming from. One of the benefits I think that I think there are some nonprofit housing providers who do this very well is engage the community and make sure that what they're building mirrors the community. We have a number of them that does very well with that. And so when you're driving, you don't see something that sticks out. It just looks like a renovated home that's been there just as long as the other homes. And that's what I think we would all want. On Alpine, 28th, and Plainfield, the areas of those corridors that I'm speaking to more specifically with my A2P plan really is the areas where there's more retail that is no longer in existence. And so when you drive down these streets that, are really busy streets in neighboring cities like Wyoming or Kentwood, you can see where there is housing that exists kind of behind. You have berms and trees that protect it, but there's housing back there. And because we have a lot of space in some of the lots that exist on these dilapidated or closed building, fronts, there's a lot of room to be able to help us with our housing crisis by being able to build right in those areas. So that's what I'm hoping to gain from exploring A2P at a level that will hopefully attract developers to want to build on those corridors.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question is, well, more than a question, is more of a statement, and I think it's a very powerful one. As the first African-American city commissioner, your tenure holds historical significance. How do you plan to leverage that experience and that perspective to address the needs of diverse communities in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, and it's one that I don't take lightly. I am honored to have also worked to help elect the first Latina who serves on the commission. Because as I think I said earlier, representation matters.
Of course. And
I think that that's important for the community to be able to see. And I think just continue to do what we already do is just to be accessible, making sure that that we're never too busy, never too big, never too whatever the case may be, even in these historic seats and in these seats that can be demanding, to be able to have access and interact with the community. I do my job better when I have interactions from the community to know what it is that they need. And so I always want to be accessible to make sure that the community can rely on, my listening ear to the concerns that they have. And I'm not afraid of challenging conversations. So I also know that sometimes those conversations won't be pleasant, or they may not necessarily be happy with a decision or a direction. But still to have the door open to say, we welcome your feedback. We welcome what it is that you have to share. I'll just share one of the things that I did when things have gotten really tough at the City Commission, and we had a lot of people coming to the commission meeting, probably for maybe 2 years, the last 2 years. I started attending those. I would come to the meeting a half hour early, and I announced to everyone, if you want to talk to me directly, I will be here a half hour, sitting there in the chambers and at the dais. Anybody who has questions for me can come to me. I don't want, at no point do I ever want people to feel like that they won't have access.
Of course.
And so that's meaningful to me, is to be able to give people the access that they need, because I know how it feels to not feel heard,
Yes.
or to feel dismissed, or to feel like your voice doesn't matter. And that's the last thing I would ever want to do while serving as mayor.
Yeah, I think for the communities is very important, and specifically for minorities, right, to be able to have that feedback and that interaction and that visibility. Hey, I exist. So I think that's
right.
That's a great point. Thank you. You also emphasized on collaboration and business-minded approach in your announcement. How do you intend to engage with community stakeholders and businesses to achieve your goals?
Yeah, so some of what we're doing now is just having conversations, and we'll be opening. I don't want to share all of my campaign plans, but some of what we'll be doing is making sure that we're engaging at all levels, to make sure that we're getting feedback on what the community wants. I don't have all of the answers, but what I do have is the ability to convene people, even people who may be on opposing sides of an issue, bringing them together to be able to have really strong conversations to seek the results that we're all looking for. And that's what I'm hoping to bring as mayor, is the ability to, let's have the conversation. Let's open up the junk drawer that we've been hiding a lot of stuff in Grand Rapids in, and start addressing those issues. Let's open up the closets we've been setting things aside that we don't really want to talk about. Let's talk about those now, so that we can come up with the solutions that's going to make Grand Rapids an amazing place to live for every single resident that's here.
Awesome. And then finally, to our last question, how do you plan to actively engage your voters and stakeholders throughout your campaign to ensure their voices are heard and considered in shaping the future of this beautiful city?
Yeah, and I'll go back to my last response, and that's exactly how. It's just making sure that those conversations are happening, making sure the door is open.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for being here with us today. I really appreciate the time that you have taken. I think this speaks a lot of you wanting to build those relationships with our communities. And thank you for your time. We know you're busy.
Thank you, Jose, for having me, and welcome to Grand Rapids, though it's not really new for you, but thank you for your time and your interest in having this conversation. It's been great.
Thank you. It's been great for me too. Well, as we conclude our insightful interview with Senate Lenear, candidate for Grand Rapids mayor, we thank her for sharing her vision and dedication to the city's growth and well-being. We encourage our viewers to stay informed and engaged in the upcoming elections. And for more details on her campaign, please visit senitaformayor.com. And thank you for joining us. And don't forget to make your voice be heard at the polls. Thank you.